The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guests today, Kevin Crossley-Holland, Susan Huber, and Joan Cady, are faculty members at the University of St. Thomas. They'll be talking about the annual Children's Literature Conference sponsored by the university. The 1994 theme of the conference, A Peaceable Kingdom. Sue, Joan, Kevin, it's a pleasure to have you here on All About Kids today, and it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, children's literature, and how the community is exploring different aspects of literature and getting educators, librarians, and other interested people involved. So you and Joan are both on the faculty in the education department at the University of St. Thomas, and Kevin, you have the chair for humanities and fine arts.
A kind of oddball between all kinds of departments.
Well, I think it's fascinating because we often think of the University of St. Thomas as being more of a school focusing on business issues rather than fine arts or children's literature. So it's a pleasure to be exploring a different facet of the university.
I suppose people do think that still, do they? I mean, I begin to hear encouraging noises, like the administration is so seriously committed to a development of the arts and of the liberal arts as a whole, that I believe that we're doing a lot to underpin the public perception of our commitment to the liberal arts.
Well, that's exciting, and of course one of the programs you're involved in right now in the early winter of 1994 is the planning of your second annual Children's Literature Conference. And the conference in February of 1994, February 12th in fact, is entitled A Peaceable Kingdom. And this is another way of offering the community an opportunity to talk about children's literature as it affects the way people live. How did you decide on this as a theme?
I would like Sue to respond to that question.
It was really a collaborative process. We were meeting, and the idea just came. We were talking about conflict resolution, what ideas are important to children, what ideas are important to society, what do children read about, what are teachers interested in as far as children's literature. And somehow or another I said, imagine a peaceable kingdom. And there it was.
Perfect.
Sometimes one has the very best ideas on the hoof, but
it was on the hoof, definitely.
it's like Yeats said, I mean, all this stitching and unstitching is worth naught unless it seemed but a moment's thought, but the trick is in all the pre-planning, really.
Well, Kevin, obviously you are also a poet and an author yourself. You've written some children's books, and you have a strong commitment to helping children understand the beauty of language.
Yes, and I think that we're aware as a university, my colleagues in the education department, other people from within the campus, that Minnesota has many fine writers for children and many fine illustrators, but there may well be room for more interpretative action. One's aware of the fabulous work being done at the Kurland collection, assembling and offering for research purposes a fine body of manuscripts and so on through Karen Nelson Hoyle. But there aren't all that many children's literature conferences, although, as Sue was saying, conference is rather a dry word. We really need to invent some brighter, more... one talks about an exaltation of larks and a charm of lullabies. What can we say for conferences, or something of conferences?
Ideas?
Ideas. Well, what are some of the ideas that you're going to explore in February of '94?
Well, I think one of the big ideas is the response to literature, and I think in our series of workshops. We have art and we have music and writing, and ways children can respond to literature in a variety of forms.
So actually it's fine arts, the whole spectrum of appreciation.
In a way, our conference models the idea of reader response to literature, and this is something that we try and do educationally and to teach while we're having a conference or whatever we want to call it, a festival, a celebration. And the modeling of the response should encourage people to respond to literature. If you don't respond, there's a dryness.
So for a classroom teacher to say our assignment today is to read chapter 1 of that, that's not the way you are encouraging your students to present books to their children or their students.
And yet I'm sure you're right to emphasize the importance of the word. I mean, I was with my 2 daughters on Saturday, and I realized that we were exposed to traditional tale and traditional rhyme in 3 different contexts. The Snow Queen at the Minnesota Youth Opera, then Beauty and the Beast on the top floor of Dayton's, and then the Holly Dazzle Parade with all kinds of floats modelled on traditional rhyme and traditional tale. But none of that's any use without reaffirming the centrality of the word. And that, I think, is what this conference is to do, to reaffirm, all these conferences, to reaffirm the centrality of the word and ways of responding to the word, the uses of word.
Well, do you think, Kevin, as an author yourself, that sometimes we who work with children are afraid that books aren't enough anymore, that because children have access to Holly Dazzle or television, that somehow the book, the word, is drier than our young readers expect? Or
I think one goes in both directions at the same time. One sees people passionate about the word and books for children, like Joan and Sue. One also sees that there are forces encroaching on a child's ability to respond to the book, and so that the mediation of teacher and of librarian is absolutely crucial, and parent, of course, above all.
Are your students traditional age students? In other words, coming straight out of high school, or are you working with more adults who've already had some work experience, possibly even doing some work in the schools?
I have some of both, probably more traditional than non, but certainly a combination of both.
What response do you get from the people who've worked with children and perhaps presented literature in some form to them? Are they excited by kind of a different approach that you're offering?
My students are very, very excited about a different approach. The older the student, the more excitement. The non-traditional students, I think, that we serve
Definitely.
are involved in literature. We have to bring the traditional age students along a little bit to come to that point.
Because they haven't had the opportunity to see the excitement in children when you
Right.
do.
The frame of reference isn't there. Their experience is too close to being a child themselves in most cases. So,
I also think that our instructors of children's literature at St. Thomas, they convey this love of literature that by the end of the semester, the students are commenting how much they love literature themselves. So I think that's the...
And the fact that you, Sue, are teaching secondary students and literature is going to be a part of that curriculum for them, that's exciting, because I don't think high school students very often have the opportunity to have a broadly based literature curriculum.
it certainly surprises them when they enroll in a class called Education's Place in Society, or worse yet, Psychology of Instruction, and they're asked to read a novel and relate this to the world that they're going to be part of, to the teaching world.
Certainly, as a Catholic institution, the University of St. Thomas must have a focus on strong social justice values, and do you see the themes of this 1994 conference and the theme of the 1993 one, which was focusing on multicultural children's literature, as helping to carry forward that mission?
Absolutely, yes. Joan, you were going to say the same thing.
I was. I think the multicultural facet of last year's conference is part of St. Thomas's mission. It's very, the university has a strong commitment to multicultural issues. And also this theme for this year one theme seemed to evolve into the next theme. And we are already trying to generate the theme for our third conference. and that is still evolutionary, I think. But
I think, I mean, anyone who comes to Minnesota from the outside, let alone from 4,000 miles away, is bound to be struck not only by a Catholic institution's commitment to these strong social values, but the whole state's aching, stubborn, pious heart. And yet I want again to reaffirm the role of the author. He is not the psychoanalyst, he is not the sociologist, he's not the therapist. He or she is the writer. And therefore, to go back to your first thought about the word, in fact, it occurred to me when I gave the Hubs lecture, which is I suppose the keynote speech at the first of these conferences, I wrote something about this, and maybe it's appropriate just now to tip it in.
Please.
It's late in white America, says the poet Lucille Clifton. It's late in white Europe, it's late in Australia and New Zealand, it's late, very late, in white South Africa. I'm aware the truth of this is widely recognized in Minnesota. The great moral tasks, as they've been called by the poet Wendell Berry, of honesty and peace and neighborliness and brotherhood and care of the earth, are part of the daily agenda here in a way that would astonish many of my fellow Englishmen. Please forgive me, therefore, for my presumption in what I call talking turtle, that's to say, sticking my neck out. One way in which we can proceed is the reason for our gathering here today. I said in the speech, we can proceed through the word. This is what Confucius has to say in the Great Digest. Wanting good government in their own states, they first established order in their own families. Wanting order in the home, they first disciplined themselves, desiring self-discipline. They rectified their own hearts, and wanting to rectify their hearts, they sought precise verbal definitions of their inarticulate thoughts, the tones given off by the heart. Let us try then to find the precise words, the words which identify our deeper longings, and let us find stories which, by embodying these longings, enable children to understand themselves and to have courage. When I wrote that, what I had in mind was that all the interpretation in the world is no use at all without the words to start interpreting.
And to hear you read those kinds of words, it's kind of chilling experience, and I think that's the difference between
I think we
literature.
know in a way, I mean, that our thoughts are only as good as the words that express them, and if we don't use our words with precision, we are somehow insulting and devaluing our thoughts and emotions. So that this conference, I mean, is both to celebrate the word and the interpretation of the word as embodied in story.
And again, to give those of us working with children the experience of literature. I mean, sometimes literature has a pompous and stuffy, but we want children to experience the very best, just as we're concerned about their nutrition.
I think that's a very important point. We reviewed many possibilities for our keynote speaker for this next year, and we set them aside reluctantly because they were figures of undoubted interest, but their heart was a sociological heart rather than a writer's heart.
And that's something as a children's librarian that has interested me. For instance, many of the books on the 1993 American Library Association Best Books for Children list are what we might call politically correct, or they're books that are written from a perspective that almost, that there's not the joy, not the imagination. They're well written, and they focus on topics like racism, homelessness, the kinds of issues that adults and children need to be concerned about, but I still want children to have that celebration of the word. And certainly in your writing, Kevin, you have always
Again, I
focused on
think
that.
you're right. I'm very much in tune with what you're saying, that it's the imagination that does the trick, isn't it? That's the fuse. That's the point of ignition.
Judge Isabel Gomez from the Hennepin County Juvenile District Court was a guest on our program some time ago, and she is passionate about what happens to children when they get into the legal system. And she said, if you want to give these children something, give them art, give them music, give them literature, because their souls are dead. And for someone like Judge Gomez, who has seen absolutely everything, I thought that was an amazing and perceptive
It's very powerful to think about children whose souls are dead in our society. It's frighteningly powerful.
So even more important for those of us who are working with children to carry this on in a messianic sort of way. Now, the lecture, Kevin, that you prepared for last year, in fact, which you gave, is sponsored by Ron and Margaret Hubbs.
Yes, in fact, really the conference, I think, had its origin, its genesis, in another colleague in the education department looking for an appropriate way to celebrate Ronald Hubbs and his wife Margaret, who've been extremely generous to St. Thomas with an endowment for the purchase of children's books, which means that we will in turn build up now a formidable working children's archive. And we thought perhaps that some form of annual lecture named for him, you would say, after him, I'd say, would be appropriate. And then I can't remember how, but that snowballed in the way these things do, into being an annual lecture within a children's literature conference. And this year's speaker we might want to say something about.
Yes, this year's speaker is Bob Barton, who is a storyteller and educator from Toronto, Canada. So we're looking forward to his celebration of the word in his own way. And
will he be telling stories as part of his presentation?
we hope so. But in also a written form, so we can publish his speech.
And that is something that also is available to participants in the conference.
That's right, and St. Thomas, who rather dandy at these kind of pretty productions, are
Oh, Kevin, show the cover, please.
stringing together a whole, yes, there we are, full frontal. And they will design this year's lecture and next year's in the same manner so that it'll be a nice little collector's
item. But again, giving credibility to children's literature. Often universities haven't focused on that.
Well,
as a
indeed. I mean,
serious
think of the
discipline.
way in which one has often heard that the University of Minnesota has had to be brought to the water in terms of recognizing the huge significance of the Kurland collection, if one can put it like that.
Would it be indelicate to ask you if on the faculty of St. Thomas people say he is just an author of children's books?
Well, let's not talk about me, but let's talk about Karen Nelson Hoyle, because I mean there is someone who's made a very serious contribution to the world of children's books, as we all know. And I think it's one of the functions of our conference and one of the responsibilities of people within the university to extend a hand and extend a recognition to other people in the state, in the Midwest, nationally, who've made serious contributions to the world of children's books. And so we were delighted to be able to offer Karen Nelson Hoyle an honorary degree, which was conferred on her at the first Children's Literature Conference.
In 1993.
In 1993, thank you. And that's, I was going to say a trick. That is an honor which we hope to be able to repeat.
Well, Karen has certainly been a leader for all of us, and those of us who work with children's books and children themselves deeply appreciate her efforts.
Another thing I would like to add is that our elementary program at St. Thomas is very new, and at the undergraduate level it began in 1990 and at the graduate level in 89. And so it was sort of a combination of all these forces, the endowment gift and Kevin's presence at St. Thomas and the new elementary education program, with an influx of faculty members and persons who are very interested in children's literature. And I think the conference has evolved from this meeting together of minds and hearts.
And the conference is intended for teachers, for librarians, people already in the field, people interested in children's literature.
Absolutely.
Who have nothing to do with education or libraries.
Right.
And they'll be able to call the University of St. Thomas for information.
That's right. And they should call Diane Pogue at the University of St. Thomas for further information.
Or I'm sure they can call the information number and
That's
they will
right,
get transferred. What else is going to go on? You talked a little bit about art and music and storytelling. What sorts of music? What sorts of...
Oh, we've got Pop Wagner.
Yes.
Coming to sing folk songs. I'm a great fan of Pop's when he's, not particularly when he's trying to lasso people.
So it's
but when
definitely
he's-
not going to be a stuffy conference. Definitely.
not.
And then we have a film too, which we
That's
may
right.
want to say something about.
Maybe you should talk about that film.
Earlier this semester, St. Thomas produced a play called I Never Saw Another Butterfly, which revolves around the children, the luckless children who were imprisoned, and many of whom died in Terezin, the concentration camp. But they had the most phenomenal, most of them were Czech, I think, Czechoslovak, and they had the most phenomenal, inspirational teachers with them who generated in these children the ability to write the most wonderful poems and to draw pictures. And St. Thomas produced a play that revolves around these children, and in turn a documentary feature has been made about the production and some of the questions that arise when you have a Catholic institution deciding to do something about Jewish suffering. And some people think that's entirely appropriate, some people think that's entirely inappropriate, and so it becomes once again a cross-cultural documentary.
And as I recall the book, I Never Saw Another Butterfly, the thing that comes from that is the joy and often hope that those children express. So I think sometimes we feel totally at a loss or depressed about what's happening to our children today, and yet to think art, music, literature can give them that sense of spirit, of hope.
It's a redeeming power. And curiously enough, it's quite often when societies are under some form of pressure that it produces its finest art and most socially vibrant art.
Some of the teachers with whom I've worked who are working with children who don't have a lot in their lives have brought examples of books that the children have written or drawings that they've made after the teachers have shared picture books with them, and that's terribly exciting because the children blossom, and that sounds really kind of corny, but it happens. It does happen. Children and books.
We call that our reader response section to the conference, and we're working with right now 2 teachers, possibly 3, who will be asked to read some selection of their choice to their class, and then the class in turn will respond and will display it, which should be kind of an exciting display.
Exciting thing. There's nothing that pleases children more than to know that the work they've done is being enjoyed by other people. That's the amazing variety of things. And of course, one of the most exciting things that I think that happens at any event like your February 12th, 1994 conference, get that date in, or any sharing of people who love children and love children's books is what we learn from each other. It's just the spark, and it's...
I think the whole idea of a thematic conference is the idea of all of us working together as a committee to generate the whole event, and it's a representation of thematic teaching that we're recommending for our educators. So it has been a wonderful experience.
So it will be in line with the curriculum. That's okay. As we were chatting before the program started, I asked what the theme was for next year, and you've alluded to the 1995 conference, and Kevin, you suggested that I ask you on the air about some of the possible.
I think I suggested that you ask Joan or Sue.
I'm very anxious to hear.
I think I'm going to pass the buck for a minute, but we're getting better at this as we go along, and there are now a whole group of possibilities, as indeed possible speakers. We've already extended feelers to a number of people, and so I think your viewers have got to watch for the next exciting installment.
Cliffhanger.
Well, and that I think that the fact that you have so many ideas that you can hardly bear to choose among them is one of the things that is exciting about children's books, because they cover every possible theme that we don't have to worry about.
And I think, to be truthful, I mean, this is a great age for children's books in America and in England, in the English-speaking world. And how lovely to be able to be working in the heart of it.
Well, for our children to remember the books that they're having shared with them now. It's interesting because Minneapolis Public Library celebrated the centennial of Children's Services in 1993, and as part of that centennial celebration, they sent letters to people with Minnesota roots all over the country, and they got amazing responses. People love to talk about the books that they read as a child, and every politician, every actor, every rich and famous adult, or some adults who aren't so rich but maybe famous, there's that deep sense that what we read as children just truly does stay with us always.
And we've noticed that too, and when we invite our workshop presenters, they are so thrilled to be asked, and they want to return again the next year. And our audience is rather diverse, I would say, but it seems like it's a day of celebration, as you said, around the love of children's books. So it's a very exciting day.
And in that sense, a day of interaction. And it's true, isn't it? I mean that for all of us, it's the first 10 or 12 years in our life when we're most singular. Do we grow more the same as we grow older? Oh, I hope not. And once you start mining that quarry, as I think our workshop leaders do, then it's almost inexhaustible, the quarry of our own first formative years.
Well, children's literature certainly can help to save the world. And Joan, we've got just a minute left. Would you hold up your graphic again? And February 12th, 1994, University of St. Thomas, Peaceable Kingdom. And 1995, Worlds Yet to Explore.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today. Kevin, do you have one last little...
I don't think I really have. I was looking to see if I could celebrate the various workshop activities. But yes, I mean the first lecture was called We the Story. Let us so imaginatively enter the theatre of story that, as we hope our children will too, we actually become part of the story ourselves.
Thank you, Kevin Crossley-Holland, Joan Cady, and Sue Herbert. A Peaceable Kingdom, a conference providing an opportunity for adults who work with children to explore another facet of children's literature. Thank you, Kevin Crossley-Holland, Susan Huber, and Joan Cady. And thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency.